I did a movie that really reflected my personality, that was different from anything my father would have done.
You think you know the heartwarming story of four boys searching for a dead body, but the real tragedy was happening behind the cameras. River Phoenix, Will Wheaton, Jerry O'Connell, and Cory Feldman weren't just playing troubled kids. They were living through nightmares that would haunt them for decades. What you're about to discover will shatter your nostalgic memories. Hidden abuse, industry exploitation, and warning signs that everyone ignored. From River Phoenix's tragic destiny written in his character's fate to Cory Feldman's real-life horror that made his performance terrifyingly authentic, prepare to uncover the shocking truths behind one of cinema's most beloved coming-of-age stories. The journey to find that dead body became a prophecy none of them could escape. River Phoenix, Chris Chambers. Let's start with River Phoenix, whose portrayal of the tough, loyal Chris Chambers was so authentic it broke hearts worldwide. But here's the devastating secret most fans never knew. River wasn't acting. He was channeling real pain from a childhood so traumatic that playing Chris became a form of therapy he desperately needed. River's family background was a nightmare hidden behind his angelic appearance. His parents were members of the Children of God cult, where River and his siblings endured physical and sexual abuse that scarred him permanently. The family's nomadic lifestyle, moving from commune to commune, meant River never had a stable home or normal childhood. When he played Chris, the boy from the wrong side of the tracks with an abusive family, he was drawing from wells of real suffering. The most chilling revelation? River told director Rob Reiner that Chris's story felt like looking in a mirror. The character's desperate desire to escape his family's reputation, his fierce loyalty to his friends, and his underlying sadness were all pulled directly from River's own life. Reiner later said that River's audition was so emotionally raw that he knew immediately he'd found someone who didn't need to pretend to understand pain. But here's the most haunting secret. River Phoenix seemed to know his fate would mirror Chris Chambers. In the film, Chris dies young, shot while trying to break up a fight. River often told co-stars that he didn't expect to live past 25, a prediction that proved tragically accurate when he died of a drug overdose at 23. Cast members later said River carried a darkness that went beyond method acting. He genuinely believed he was doomed to an early death. The role became prophetic in ways that still give his co-stars chills, as if River Phoenix was playing out his own destiny on screen. Will Wheaton, Gordy LaChance. Will Wheaton's Gordy was the heart of Stand By Me, the sensitive writer whose story anchored the entire film. But what audiences didn't know was that Wheaton was living through his own version of Gordy's family trauma, dealing with pressures and abuse that made his performance devastatingly real. The most shocking truth? Wheaton's own parents were emotionally abusive, pushing him into acting against his will and treating him like a commodity rather than a child. Just like Gordy felt invisible next to his dead brother's memory, Wheaton felt worthless except for his ability to earn money for his family. The famous scene where Gordy breaks down about his father not loving him wasn't acting. It was Wheaton releasing real pain about his own parents' treatment. Wheaton later revealed that he begged his parents to let him quit acting, but they forced him to continue because of the money. He was experiencing panic attacks on set, but everyone assumed it was just typical child actor nerves. Rob Reiner noticed that Wheaton seemed genuinely depressed between takes, but the adults around him dismissed it as teenage moodiness. Here's the most heartbreaking secret. Wheaton identified so strongly with Stephen King's original story that he felt like King had somehow witnessed his life and written it down. The character's desire to escape through writing, his complicated relationship with his parents, and his deep friendships with other damaged kids all mirrored Wheaton's real experience. The role left psychological scars that took decades to heal. Overweight and had been mercilessly bullied at school before landing the role. Playing Vern meant embracing and exaggerating the very qualities that had made his real life miserable. He had to endure fat jokes and physical comedy that reinforced every insecurity he'd ever had about his body. Cast members later said they could see the hurt in his eyes during scenes where Vern was mocked. But here's what shocked everyone. O'Connell's weight wasn't just normal childhood chubbiness. He was stress eating due to his parents' messy divorce and using food to cope with depression that nobody recognized or treated. The constant focus on his appearance during filming triggered eating disorders that would plague him for years. The most devastating secret was how the industry treated him after Stand By Me's success. Casting directors only saw him as the fat kid, and he lost countless roles because he couldn't shed the Vern image. He spent his teenage years on extreme diets and exercise regimens, desperately trying to reinvent himself physically. The transformation was so dramatic that when he emerged as a leading man years later, many people didn't realize he was the same person. O'Connell has since revealed that playing Vern, while launching his career, also created a psychological prison. He became obsessed with never being seen as that vulnerable, overweight kid again, leading to years of unhealthy relationships with food and exercise. The cheerful, innocent character that audiences loved came at the cost of the young actor's self-esteem and mental health. Cory Feldman, Teddy Duchamp. Cory Feldman's Teddy Duchamp was the most damaged of the four boys, a kid desperate for his abusive father's approval despite suffering horrific treatment. But the shocking truth is that Feldman wasn't acting. He was living through abuse so severe that playing Teddy became a way to process trauma that would destroy his life. The most horrifying secret? While filming Stand By Me, Feldman was being systematically sexually abused by powerful men in Hollywood, predators who used his career as leverage to exploit him. His performance as Teddy, a boy clinging to love for a father who burned his ear on a stove, was informed by Feldman's real experience of trying to rationalize the abuse he was suffering from adults who were supposed to protect him. Feldman later revealed that his manic energy as Teddy, the character's desperate need for attention and approval, came directly from his own psychological state. He was a child crying out for help through his performance, but the adults around him either didn't recognize the signs or chose to ignore them. The famous scene where Teddy screams at the older boys who insult his father was Feldman releasing real rage about his own situation. But here's the most devastating truth. Feldman's mother was essentially pimping him out to industry predators in exchange for career opportunities. She knew what was happening and allowed it to continue because of the money and status it brought the family. The abuse wasn't just from strangers, it was a systematic exploitation enabled by the people who should have protected him most. The most chilling detail? Feldman has said that some of his abusers visited him on the Stand By Me set, and he had to pretend everything was normal while cameras rolled. The other young actors sensed something was wrong, but didn't understand what they were witnessing. Rob Reiner later expressed deep regret about not recognizing that Feldman was in crisis, though he couldn't have known the full extent of what was happening. The role of Teddy became both an outlet for Feldman's pain and a trap that kept him in the system that was destroying him. His career success made him more valuable to his abusers and gave them continued access to him. Rob Reiner, director Rob Reiner, brought Stand By Me to life with a director's eye that seemed to understand childhood perfectly, but the secrets behind his approach reveal a man haunted by his own past and desperate to give these young actors the protection he never had. What happened on his set would change his perspective on working with children forever. The most surprising truth? Reiner's connection to the material was deeply personal. He had been a lonely, overweight kid himself, bullied and searching for belonging just like the characters in Stephen King's story. He saw pieces of his own childhood in each of the four boys, which is why he was so determined to cast unknown kids rather than established child actors. He wanted authentic vulnerability, not polished performances. But here's what shocked the cast. Reiner essentially became a surrogate father to all four boys during filming. He noticed that several of them came from troubled homes and made it his mission to create a safe space on set. He spent hours talking with them between takes, not about the movie, but about their lives, their problems, and their dreams. The boys started, coming to him with personal issues they couldn't discuss with their own parents. The most heartbreaking revelation? Reiner suspected that some of his young actors were dealing with serious problems at home, but he didn't know how far to push without overstepping his boundaries as a director. He later said he noticed warning signs. Feldman's manic behavior, Wheaton's depression, Phoenix's premature maturity, but felt helpless to intervene in their personal lives. The deepest secret was Reiner's growing horror as he watched these talented kids navigate the entertainment industry. He saw agents and managers treating them like commodities, parents exploiting them for money, and studio executives making decisions based on profit rather than the children's welfare. The experience made him vow to be more protective of young actors in future projects. Years later, especially after River Phoenix's death, Reiner has spoken about the guilt he carries for not doing more to help these kids, even though he provided more support than most directors would have. Stephen King and the source material. Stephen King's original novella, The Body, was far darker and more brutal than the film adaptation, but the secrets behind how much of the story came from King's real childhood reveal why this tale of lost innocence resonated so powerfully with audiences worldwide. The most shocking truth? King wrote The Body as a direct response to his own childhood trauma. Like Gordy, King had lost a close friend in a tragic accident when he was young, and he spent years wondering if he could have prevented it. The story was King's way of processing survivor's guilt that had haunted him since childhood. He later revealed that many of the specific incidents in the story, finding a dead body, dealing with bullies, the complex dynamics of childhood friendship, were pulled directly from his memories. But here's what most fans never knew. King's original story was much more violent and disturbing. The novella included graphic descriptions of abuse, more explicit violence, and a much darker ending that would have been impossible to film with child actors. Rob Reiner had to fight King initially because the author was worried that softening the story would rob it of its emotional power. The most surprising revelation, King was heavily involved in the production, visiting the set multiple times and working closely with the young actors. He was particularly drawn to River Phoenix, seeing in him the kind of troubled, intelligent kid he had been himself. King later said that watching Phoenix perform his words was like seeing his own childhood brought to life. The deepest secret was King's concern about exploiting real childhood trauma for entertainment. He worried that the story might glamorize the kind of pain he and these young actors had experienced. This internal conflict led to his insistence that the film emphasize the healing power of friendship, rather than just the darkness of growing up. King has since said that The Body was the most personal story he ever wrote, and watching it become Stand By Me taught him both the power and the responsibility that comes with mining real pain for art. Production secrets. The making of Stand By Me was itself a journey into dangerous territory, with filming conditions that put the young cast at genuine risk and production decisions that revealed how little the industry cared about child safety in the 1980s. The most terrifying secret? The famous train trestle scene, where the boys run from an oncoming locomotive, was filmed with a real train on an active railway bridge. The timing had to be perfect. Too slow and the train would catch them, too fast and they'd risk falling off the bridge. What audiences don't know is that during one take, Jerry O'Connell stumbled and nearly fell between the railway ties. The train was close enough that the engineer had to slam on the emergency brakes. The Oregon location presented constant dangers that the production tried to hide from parents and studio executives. The boys were filming in areas with real bears, unstable terrain, and rapidly changing weather conditions. River Phoenix was bitten by a snake during one outdoor scene, though it turned out to be non-venomous. The creek scenes were shot in water that was contaminated with agricultural runoff, and several cast members got sick from exposure. But here's the most shocking production secret. The child labor laws were routinely violated during filming. The boys were working longer hours than legally allowed, often in dangerous conditions, because the production was behind schedule and over budget. Their parents, blinded by the money and prestige, either didn't know or didn't care about the violations. The most disturbing revelation came from the catering and craft services. Adults on set were openly drinking alcohol and smoking marijuana around the child actors, creating an unprofessional environment that normalized substance abuse. This was particularly dangerous for kids like River Phoenix and Cory Feldman, who were already vulnerable to addiction and bad influences. Stand By Me showed us that the journey from childhood to adulthood comes with a price. But for these young actors, that price was far higher than anyone imagined. Their performances gave us a timeless story, but cost them pieces of their innocence that could never be recovered. Hit subscribe to discover more hidden truths behind Hollywood's most beloved films.